opportunity. I'm very excited about this opportunity. I love working with my sisters in Mississippi. I got an opportunity to work with the Mississippi Coalition before, and I made some great connections. And so I'm happy to be back in your state. I wish I was in your state because it's rainy and ugly over here. I don't know what's going on down there, but I'm just happy to be a part of this effort to bring awareness, to create opportunities and spaces for advocates to hear new information, to get reinvigorated in the work. I know this work can be trying at times when you're just constantly day in and day out, and you're just hearing stories. But advocates who are listening today, I just want to challenge you just to remember your why. Why you're doing your work, and remember that you do make a change and that you are valuable to this work. And people, even though sometimes you don't see the results that you want, you are making a difference, and people need you. So don't forget that. So as for myself, I'm Will DeBose. I've done this work for, dare I say, 20 years now. I worked in a program in Camden, New Jersey, working with men who've caused harm. So you'll hear me say some different language at times. I know that everybody's pretty familiar with saying batterers intervention program, but part of what I'm going to be talking about today is stigmas. And how those stigmas, if you will, or I like what I call the scarlet letters, that we put on individuals are not helpful to healing. They're not helpful to bring wholeness. I know the work that I've done is not work that is often celebrated. It's not often believed in, and but it's necessary. So when you're talking about working with men who caused harm or batterers, I'll go back and forth, so I'm making sure that those who maybe just tuned in can understand the population I'm talking about. You have to understand the dynamic of the individuals who you're working with. So when we talk about working with men who've caused harm, you find that there's a lot of stereotypes that are out there in society. Stereotypes as to what they look like, how they act, some of their processes and beliefs and attitudes, and I'm not saying that some of those stereotypes aren't true. Okay, so I want to say that. I don't want you to be like, oh my goodness, they don't brought this guy on here. He don't drink the Kool-Aid. He's on the other side now, and he's just trying to dispel every notion. No, that's not the case. I'm on the side of humans, of being, seeing the full person. Because a lot of times in life, let's just take it off of a person who's caused harm. A lot of times in life, we look at an individual by their circumstance. We look at an individual by what they're experiencing, as we say in social work, the presenting problem. Whatever the presenting problem is often the way that we look at the individual, but there's so much more to the person. There's a lot of intersecting factors in a person's life that really, gives the full picture. And so when we talk about men who caused harm, a lot of times our work, our movement, the domestic violence movement, doesn't want to see all of the different factors that are at play in an individual who causes harm's life. And so when we talk about domestic violence in men, particularly, having worked with men who caused harm, so I'm trying to give you a background, working with men who caused harm, being that person who was primarily the service provider, the facilitator of the groups, conducting assessments, working with the courts. Between my coworker and myself, it was a small team of 2, and then we expanded to 4. But doing that primarily for years, I've met with thousands of men, and I can tell you the commonalities between all of those men that I met with is that 90, I would say 90, and the upwards of 95% of men who cause harm or perpetrate harm have either been victims or witnesses of abuse themselves. So, you have that manifesting in their lives, it's playing out in their lives in some way. And the irony of it is that, conducting those interviews over the years, you find that, a lot of the men that I've spoken to, when they spoke about the childhood traumas that they experienced, they hated it. You know, they hated seeing their mother's abuse. They hated the arguing back and forth in the household, or the home being broken up. They hated all of the traumatic experiences that they went through as children, but nonetheless, it transpired into their own lives. And so they began to grow up and they began to perpetrate the same things that they hated, the same things that they in some instances vowed to never allow to be a part of their lives or experience, became part of their lives, and they became perpetrators of harm. Um, and so, but I found that interesting because, you know, our lives are very much like that. You know, I often share an example, a harmless example, because a lot of times what we do is we create this us and them kind of attitude, you know, with people. And this is just in general. We say, oh no, not those people. I don't do that. Or oh no, not those people. I don't do that. But we're all pretty much the same, you know. One person's vice is not that vice, but they got their own vice. Okay. And so your vice might not be, you know, assaulting someone, but you might have a vice with the local donut shop. Okay. I know y'all was supposed to laugh at that one. Okay. Or with Haagen-Dazs or Ben and Jerry's or you know, something unhealthy. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is that, you know, growing up, there's things that we hate about our living in our households at times, and they can be harmful, and they can be harmless, but nonetheless, we're all experiencing things. So I'll give you a quick example of what I mean. Um, you know, when I was growing up, my mom, you know, we didn't have a whole lot. Okay, so my mom was always with the cutting off the light. Cut off the light. You get out of the room. You cut the light off when you get out of the room. Okay, that was what it was. All right. So I just remember, like, I would have one toe out the room, and my mom would be like, "Cut the light." I'm like, "Mom, I'm not even out the room yet. I haven't even made it out." Right. So I remember the day before I left for college, I was going around the house. I was collecting my stuff so I could pack up and get ready to go. And I had the lights on. Oh my goodness. So my mom was just like, "Cut out all these lights. And what is going on?" I said, "Mom, I cannot wait to go to school, because everywhere I go, I'm leaving every light on everywhere I go." Right. So yeah, I went to school. But now that I'm an adult, right? Now that I'm an adult, I called my mom the light miser. I've become the light miser now, because I come in the house and I'm just like, "Cut these lights out. Why are all these lights on?" Now, I use that as a harmless example because it used to drive me crazy. It used to drive me crazy. But you know what? It became part of my life. And I didn't intend that. I say, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna grow up and be just like my mom." I didn't intend on doing that, but nonetheless, it transpired into my life. Okay. And so I use that as a harmless example. Please don't think that I'm making light of the situation. I'm just trying to parallel us. And when we're talking about experiences, sometimes we disconnect ourselves from experiences, saying, "Oh, that would never happen to me," or "that could never happen to me." But yeah, that particular thing might not happen to you, but nonetheless, we're all being products of our environments, the difference, you know, our households, different things that we've experienced. We're all a product of that. And so, unless we intentionally get help and healing for some of those things that were more traumatic, then we're going to find ourselves manifesting. We're going to find ourselves, those things manifesting in our lives, and we don't want to. So, let me take a deep breath, because I said a whole lot. When we talk about men who caused harm, you know, you're talking about individuals that have been exposed and saturated in, a lot of times, very dysfunctional, traumatic households. Okay. Yeah, I've sat with, you know, many men and talked about some of the different things that they've engaged in their households. Some of the messaging, direct, not indirect, direct messaging from their fathers, as to how to interact in relationships and what that looks like. Um, and then, so, you know, as they got older, you know, they're moving around in their communities, and then they're seeing how other men are interacting with females. They're seeing how they're going over their friend's house, and they're seeing how other family members are interacting, or what those family dynamics look like. And so as that maturation process, goes from childhood to adolescence, you know what I mean, to adulthood, there's a forming, that there's a forming of ideas and attitudes and beliefs that begin to happen. But if you're constantly being soaked and saturated in a particular type of environment, then that no matter what is really going to weigh heavy on how you begin to walk out your own life. So when we talk about men who caused harm, one of the biggest things that I've experienced is that the lack of awareness of exactly what they're doing. And I don't say that I'm not trying to have you take a soft stance. It's not the case at all. I'm just being honest. I'm being very transparent with you about my experience. My 15 years. I'm not just just the new Jack who just walked in the door. I'm talking 15 years of experience working with men who have said to me, "Wow, I never looked at it that way. I never thought about it. Everyone around me was doing it. No one ever told me not to do it. This is just how it was. This is what I thought that I needed to do." And I know that that might sound like a bunch of lies, and that they're trying to they were trying to get away with something, but not with me. No, it doesn't work that way. I always carried. I was very survivor centered when I did my work, and I still am survivor centered when I do my work now. And what I mean by that is that I carry the voices of survivors in my head when I'm doing my work. I carry the stories. I carry the journey. I carry that. And so for me, when I have a man in front of me who's caused harm to a survivor or to a victim that I will never meet, I have to hold all of the voices together at once and make sure that I'm not allowing anyone to get off the hook. That wasn't the case at all. But seeing the person as a whole person, you have to understand that individuals just don't wake up one morning and just decide to do something. There's a process. It progresses. It moves on from one phase to the next phase to the next phase. It's just like an abusive relationship. The person doesn't, you don't, the partner doesn't meet you and say, "Hey, listen, after 6 or 7 months, I'm going to be abusing you. Do you want to stay with me?" It doesn't happen that way. It's very, it's a very, you know, it gets doled out in small increments. You see little things begin to happen before it gets to that place where it's like a completely unhealthy. And then what happens is that the survivor, the victim, is wrapped up and weaved in this web, of lies and deceit and manipulation. And it's very hard to let go of that. If I had you in a room, which I would love to do one day, is, what I do with people is I would say, how many of us have been in an unhealthy relationship, right? We can all raise our hands to that. And how easy is it to let go? It's not. It's very, very challenging. It's very difficult. So, when you talk about this work and how important it is to understand that very fact that I mentioned, and that's why I kind of opened up the way that I did, is like remembering your why, is because for me, a lot of times what would happen is that I would have these men go through this program. They would do really well, but then they would go back out and they would find a different relationship, and they hadn't kind of quite grasped everything that they needed to grasp, and then they found themselves in another situation, and then they wound up back in the program again. And so I mentioned that because the change process is very difficult. It's a very difficult process, and it's not easy. It's not easy for the survivor, the victim survivor, and it's not easy for the person who caused harm. And they say on average it takes an individual 7 times trying and failing before they actually make a change. And so we have to remember that. And so that's not to give a permission slip to say, "Hey, listen, you got 7 times to mess up." But it's just a reality for us who are advocates, for us who are workers, for us who are on the other side trying to help create change. We need to understand that fact of just how difficult the change process is. So for me today, the work that I do, the prevention work that I do, so I'm on the other end of it, is that when I was doing this, when I was providing direct services for the batterers intervention program, I began to notice a trend. When I first started out in my first, I would say first year, 0 to 6 years in, I'm seeing that we were constantly pretty much serving men that were between the ages of 35 to 50. I would say that was our pretty consistent base, sprinkled in a couple younger folks, in between. From years 6 to 10, the trend started getting lower. And then I started seeing men between the ages of 24 and 35. And then the older men started being the exception, sprinkled in here and there. And then between year 10 and 15, we were fielding calls from the local juvenile justice commission detention center asking if we could take 17-year-old boys who had domestic violence histories, within their facilities. And we started seeing, so between year 10 to 15, I'm looking at the ages of 18 to 24 with, and if just to kind of be fair, 18 to 35. I mean, and then you're seeing, it was really primarily 18 to 24, and then you're seeing 35, 50, between the 35 and 50 range sprinkled in here or there, but it was predominantly younger folks. And so I'm looking at this over the time of a 15-year span. Now, I didn't do any official research. No, if you ask me, Will, do you have this data? No, I don't have any data. This is just me being observant in my work and and that's just what I noticed. And so for me, it began to be one of those things where I had this burden and this passion began to burn in my heart, where I said, why do we have to be reactive to this? Why can't we be proactive? We need to get in front of this. We need to start getting into our schools. We need to start talking to our younger generations, because, if any of you, and I'll throw out, a resource, if any of you are familiar with ACEs, oh my goodness, and I can't think of it. Childhood experience, adverse. There's the word. I couldn't think of the A. I am throwing out a resource, and I couldn't think of what the acronym meant. But ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences. There was a longitudinal study done that really took a look at that, and basically what it said is that, with the presence of certain amount of ACEs, within a child's life, and basically these are traumatic experiences. Okay, so the more traumatic experiences a child had in their lives, they connected it to their adulthood and found that they had certain physiological things that began to manifest in their lives. But there was also a social component to that as well too, and it mentioned things around their social life as well. So you take that research and you say, okay, we've followed this from here to here, and we see that the connection between these two things, we need to do something about this. But I really wasn't seeing where the work was going in that direction, where we were making a concerted effort to really get to our young men and boys. Now, I'm not excluding our ladies. I'm not excluding our young girls, but I'm here today to talk about men, right? This is what I was asked to talk about. So I'm here to talk about men. Okay. Our young men and boys are being socialized in a way where it is lending to violence against women. Okay. There is a socialization. Now, that's not to say, and I know men who might be listening say, okay, well, who's this guy? What is he talking about? No, listen, I'm just as much of a man as you are. There were things that I was taught. There was things that are great aspects and great messaging that we're taught. But when we talk about this, and I have to give credit to Tony Porter, who calls it the collective socialization of man, also known as the man box. That's another resource for you to look at, okay? The collective socialization, also known as the man box. So when you talk about that, what Tony talks about is how we're socialized as men. And so the socialization that we get is very conflictual within our own within our own gender. You know, you have men who are, you know, hyper masculine, you have men who are, you know, a little bit more sensitive, and then they're deemed to be feminine, or they're deemed to be less of a man. You have all these different components that work in our own gender. And I'm not here to say one thing is right or one thing is wrong. I'm saying that the way that we socialize, the way that we're socialized with a lot of respects is to in a way where it devalues women. Okay. And that socialization, what begins to happen is that we're not able to really express our feelings. I'm going to give you a little pop quiz, little homework assignment. Go to the man in your life, right? Ladies who are in on this call, go to the man in your life and ask him to give you some feeling words. Okay? Probably couldn't give you feeling words. Okay? Men, we're either angry or happy. We don't feel sad. We don't feel melancholy. We don't have a way to really describe the way we accurately feel about things because we're not socialized that way. Okay. We're not socialized to really express emotions, to express feelings. Now, you know, I have some dear friends that I you know from college that I buddy with, you know, and we're always joking and laughing, and they're always saying, and this is the way that it's been for years. Well, you're always the sensitive one. You're always the sensitive one. You're always the sensitive one. And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna be real. I had a problem with that throughout my whole life. I had a problem with that. I had a problem because it was like I didn't want to be seen as the sensitive person. I didn't want to be seen as that person, but I just couldn't help who I was because I was primarily raised by my mom. So I was very connected to the experiences of women. I was raised by my grandmother. You know, I was raised by my aunt. So I had a lot of women that were around me growing up, old Southern Black women that, you know, that raised me and taught me a lot of things. And so that was my primary. But then on the other end, playing sports, I was around these hyper masculine men that were just like, you know, they were men's men, like really strong. They, you know what I mean? They're out there with their leg falling off, and you know, you just got to keep going. Like that's just what it was. But what happens is that it gets confusing at times as to what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. But then when you get into a relationship with your partner, it's supposed to be this place of, you know, if I once again, if I had you in a room and I would say, ladies, what do you say your biggest issue with your man is? He doesn't know how to what? Go ahead, y'all can come off mute.
Express yourself.
Express himself. He doesn't know how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
We're not taught to really communicate that way. We're not really taught to have expressions. Another pop quiz. Ask your man how his day at work went. He's going to give you the facts. It was this, and this, right? You share your day at work. Oh my goodness. Look, I can't look. Let me tell you, this girl came in and she had these shoes on. I don't know what she did. Her hair was crazy. Look, you've given me the whole wardrobe issues, all the wardrobe issues before you even got to how your actual day went, because you were hung up on that. But in simplest forms, it's just we're straight, black and white, usually straight to the point. We're going to give you the facts, and you're going to give us all the description, all the extra stuff. Is there anything wrong? No, it's not wrong. But when you're talking about bringing together relationships, if a man isn't really taught how to do those things in a healthy way, then you're going to have conflict in the relationship. And so what happens with that is that, you know, a man, so you couple those just fundamental, right? You couple the fundamentals. I'm not even talking about the traumatic things that's happened in either person's childhood, right? We're not talking about that. We're just talking about the fundamental differences of communication between a man and a woman, okay? So you bring those fundamentals together in a relationship, there's already a recipe for conflict, okay? And then on top of that, you have unhealthy, traumatic experiences that either party has been, you know, exposed to, you know, during their lives, which further adds a recipe for challenges and for struggle in the relationship. Okay, so what happens is this: is that, you know, if you have a male in a relationship who is not familiar with expressing himself, and he's had traumatic experiences in his childhood where he's witnessed, abuse and trauma, hated it, but it manifests into their own lives, his own life, and then he begins to perpetrate that harm on his partner. A lot of times what ends up happening is that mechanism that comes into place is that, okay, either she calls the police, the neighbor calls the police, someone gets the system involved. Okay, and rightly so. And rightly so. Okay, ladies, let me just tell you, you do not have to, anyone in an unhealthy relationship, you are not obligated to stay in that relationship. Please seek help, find opportunities. There is somebody out there that is going to treat you how you deserve to be treated. Let me just put that out there right now. Okay, so what happens is that mechanism gets put in place. Okay, perpetration of harm against the partner, police gets called, judicial system gets in place. The judicial system is black and white. Okay, they're only looking at it black and white. They're not asking the questions as to why. That's when a batterer's intervention program comes into place. Okay, so when that comes into place, a good batterer's intervention program is going to sit down and conduct an assessment and conduct an interview. Just follow me, I'm going somewhere with this. Okay, is going to conduct an interview and an assessment. Okay, and then there's going to be the expectation that that individual is going to complete X amount of sessions in a batterer's intervention program. Okay, hopefully on the way to rehabilitation and never to recidivate again. Okay, but what happens in that sometimes is that the psychology behind providing the service to the person who caused harm sometimes does not lend, and often, not sometimes, I'm going to say often, more times than not, does not lend to really making that person whole, making the person who caused harm whole. There's a stigma that's put on the person who caused harm, if you will. They're branded with a scarlet letter on them that says this person's bad, this person's caused harm. They are, they're not allowed to see their kids, they're not allowed to do this, they're not allowed to do that. Okay, in a lot of my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and so I've been in this work long enough that I'm going to say it unapologetically, that's not realistic. It's not realistic. It's not realistic to think that they're not going to be fathers anymore. They're still fathers. They're still sons. They're still brothers. 9 times out of 10, they're still going to be in that relationship with that person. Okay, because as I talked about before, on average, it takes an individual 7 times trying and failing before they actually make a change. So for us to think in the work, to think that that relationship is just going to automatically dissolve, it's not realistic. So what can we do? Do we need to hold the person who caused harm accountable? 1000% we do. But I think we need to take it a step further. And while we're holding them accountable and being survivor-centered, we can definitely be providing services that help make them whole as well too. Okay, asking questions as to some of those things that transpired in their childhood, bringing awareness and helping them bridge the gap, making those connections between some childhood experiences. Now, I know that people might push back and say, okay, well, Will, not every childhood experience is going to manifest in your adult life. You're absolutely 1000% right. But I guarantee you some of those things that you don't even know are creeping and lingering around in your own life. Okay, in your own life, as well as they do in mine, that you have to constantly be working on. But what happens is that some of those things manifest themselves in other ways where they become extremely problematic in people's lives. And so I guess the point that I want to get across today is that if we really want to end domestic violence, we have to work with everyone. Everyone deserves an opportunity to heal in the situation. And a lot of times, even in the work, so here I am as a man today talking about this work. Now, I've been in this work 20 years. I've been in spaces where I've been one of 6 men in a room of 300 women, okay? Because the work doesn't really, at times, even value men being in the work. or there's a reluctance to include men in the work. But this is a men issue because men are perpetrating the harm. It's not just a men issue, but men can help with this issue. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not men coming in and taking over. It's a partnership. It's men speaking to men and saying, hey, listen, we can't do this. Like, there has to be another way to go about this, and helping to undo some of those harmful norms that are just placed on men, that we just think that this is just a certain way, or that it has to be this way. And it really doesn't, because a lot of it is taught in our young boys. I often use this example, and I've used it for years. So if you've ever heard me speak, pardon me, but I'm going to use it again. You have a son and a daughter, right? And I usually, if I was in a room again, I would ask, raise a hand, who has a son and a daughter? Okay. All right. Your son and your daughter are outside playing. Your son comes in the house, right? Crying and screaming and crying, right? He's got a cut on his leg. All right. What do you tell your son to do? Now, don't give me the DV awareness answer. Tell me what you do with your son.
Me, with mines, I'm gonna try to do something to make it better. What mama need to do? I'm gonna try to get some, some peroxide and get a Band-Aid. You need a Band-Aid? I'm saying you need a Band-Aid.
Okay. Okay. Now let me tell you, I've been in a room with 200, 300 people, and you know what I hear? Stop crying.
Yep.
Stop crying. Now, see, no, but LaDonna, that's fine. That's fine, LaDonna, because you know what? Because you're doing something different, right? You're doing something different. But often the way that we're socialized, stop crying. You're being a little punk. Get it together. Go throw some dirt on it. Get back outside, and don't come in here because I don't want to hear that again. Be a big boy. Be a man. Okay. Kid's 5 years old. All right. So now he's going back outside, getting himself together, going back outside, right? 5 minutes later, the daughter comes in. She's crying, right? What are you doing with her?
Same thing.
Okay, same. See, LaDonna, you're the exception, Donna.
Yeah, same thing.
Somebody else. Now, what I've heard is, oh,
come here, baby.
Come here, baby. It's gonna be okay. So on and so forth. Right? She's laid up. She's laid up on the sofa now. She's got her leg up. She got a cut about that big, right? She got a bow on her knee, right? She's right, but so what I'm trying to explain to you is, in this instance, is that what was taught there. There was two messages that were taught there. Taught to the boy, crying is associated with being a girl. You're being feminine. You're showing weakness, so on and so forth. I'm not a man if I'm crying, and it's like that message gets delivered. So now what's happened is that the girl who comes in, it's okay to cry. It's actually nurtured. Like it's okay to be in contact with those feelings of pain. Okay. And so you have two educational opportunities that came about right then and there that only further get supported as they continue to grow. Okay. And so it's like, we have to do work to help change the tide. Now, I'm not saying you come in and that's, that we don't want to, teach that we want to teach our boys not to cry, or just to be crying all over the place. I'm not saying that, but I think, LaDonna, it's great that you gave that example in real time, because he was just treated as equally as his sister was treated. It wasn't any difference. He was treated equally. He had pain, it was acknowledged. He had an injury, it was acknowledged, and he got treatment for it, and it was acknowledged. Okay. And I'm telling you, go to the men in your life. You want to look, I'm sending y'all with a whole bunch of homework assignments. Go to the men in your life and ask them what their approach would be. And you'll be surprised. You'll probably hear exactly what I'm saying, because that's just how we're socialized. Okay. And so let me pause, because I know that, let me pause for two reasons. Let me check for time. And then let me also check to see if we have any questions.
Yes, you do have a question in the chat. It says, do you think mothers and fathers tend to respond differently to their injured child? Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, it all depends how you were socialized.
So my mom being a nurse, when we came in the house, it was an assessment of how bad the injury was. So if it wasn't as bad, then my mom, because this is what she witnessed as men being socialized, was like, well, you all right, you okay. Go back outside, you're gonna be okay. You know, but it was something bad, then it's like, okay, then you maybe got some peroxide and a Band-Aid, you know what I mean? You know, and it like, you know, clean it up and do that. But, you know, and this is being raised by my mom, because she witnessed the collective socialization of men, because she had brothers, and this is how it, not that she said it to me, but this is what I've seen doing this social work, is that that's what she saw. So this is what she was going to raise her boys to be, and this is how it was. And so it's not, I won't say it's subject to gender. I just think it's subject to your childhood. So like for me, like doing the work that I do, now I'm not going to say doing the work that I do that I've done this perfectly. So please don't think that I have arrived. I'm not. Because sometimes I think about the stuff that I've done with my grandkids, and I'm just like, ooh, that wasn't the message that you wanted to really deliver. But nonetheless, that's what happened. But I tried. But I do hug my boys. I do, you know, even though they don't want to be hugged anymore, I do hug them. I tell them I love them. You know, I do that. But I think that it's all about how you were, you know, your socialization, how you were socialized. Like so. Yeah, my mom was tough with those things, but you know what? I know how to cook, clean. I know how to wash clothes. I know how to do all those things. My mom, like, I was fully domesticated by the time I went off to college. I was teaching people how to wash their clothes when I was in college, because they didn't know how to separate the whites from the darks, and everything was just all blended together. And anyway, I'm not trying to give you 101 here, but what I'm saying is that it really all depends on how you were socialized. Is there any more questions, anybody?